All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to tackle a skill that is absolutely essential for college-level work, but let's be honest, it can feel a little intimidating at first. We're talking about how to critique a research article. But don't worry, we're going to break it down step by step, and by the end of this, you're going to be a full-fledged research detective. So if this is your first time being asked to do this, maybe for a research methods class or something similar, it is totally normal to feel a little lost. You might be looking at this paper thinking, who am I to question a published expert? I get it, but this isn't about tearing someone's work to shreds. It's about building a really important academic muscle.
You know, the best way I've found to approach this is to put on a detective's hat. Seriously, the article you're reading, that's your case file. Your job is to sift through the evidence, question the methods, and figure out just how solid the final conclusions really are. It's an investigation.
So what is this mission exactly? Let's get a really clear picture of what a critique actually is, and maybe more importantly, what it isn't.
Okay, so a critique is a systematic evaluation. That's the key phrase right there. You're looking at the article's content, sure, but also its methods and its overall importance. This is the biggest hurdle for most students. A critique is so much more than just a summary. You're not just a reporter stating the facts of the article. You're an analyst, digging into how the research was done and how much we should trust the findings.
And trust me, this is a skill worth building. When you learn how to properly critique, you're not just checking a box for an assignment. You're learning how knowledge actually gets built in any field. You start to see the conversation happening between researchers. It makes you a sharper thinker, and it's something you'll use throughout your entire academic career.
All right, so before any detective worth their salt hits the streets, they've got to get their toolkit ready. So let's talk about the prep work you need to do before you even start writing a single word of your critique.
First, read the article. And I don't mean just once. Your first read-through is just to get the lay of the land, the big picture. Then, you're going to read it again, and this time you'll dig into the details. Second, as you're reading, be an active reader. Take notes, write questions in the margins, highlight things that seem important or confusing. And third, get familiar with the basic structure. Almost all research papers follow a pattern: intro, method, results, discussion. Knowing what belongs in each section is like having a map of the crime scene. It tells you where to look for clues.
Okay, toolkit's ready. Let's start the investigation. We always start at the beginning, the introduction and the literature review. This is where the authors set the stage and tell you why they did this study in the first place.
So here's the big question you're asking in this section. Why does this study even exist? A good intro will point out a very specific problem or a gap in what we already know. And the literature review, that's where they prove they've done their homework. It should connect their study to a larger conversation and convince you that this new research is the necessary next step. Now we're getting to the heart of the matter, the methods section. For a detective, this is everything. This is where they lay out exactly how they collected their evidence. And let me tell you, the quality of the whole study hinges on what you find here.
I want you to think of this section like a recipe in a cookbook. Is it so clear and detailed that another researcher could follow it and get the exact same result? And was this recipe even the right one for the question they were asking? You wouldn't use a cake recipe to make soup, right? Same idea here. Oh, and don't forget to check if they handled their research ethically. That's a huge deal. And while you're looking at the method, there are two really important concepts to keep in your mind: reliability and validity. Reliability is all about consistency. If you use the same tool multiple times, do you get the same result every time? Validity is about accuracy. Does your tool actually measure the thing you think you're measuring? Think of it like a bathroom scale. If it says you weigh 150 pounds every single morning, it's reliable. But if you actually weigh 160, it's not valid. A good study needs both.
Okay, we've looked at the setup, we've examined the methods, now it's time to see what they actually found. We're moving on to the results and the discussion sections. And it's so important to know the difference between these two. The results section should be, well, kind of boring. It's just the facts. The numbers, the stats, with no interpretation. The discussion section, on the other hand, is where the authors get to step up and say, okay, here's our story. Here's what we think these numbers mean for the real world. And your job as the detective is to check if their story actually matches the evidence. Do the big, exciting conclusions they're making in the discussion really flow logically from the dry data they presented in the results? You're looking for any big leaps in logic.
And here's a pro tip. A good researcher will be honest about their study's weaknesses. If they mention limitations, that's not a flaw. That's a sign of a strong, credible author.
So, you've done all the legwork, you've analyzed the evidence, you've got your notes. It's finally time to write up your official report, to put it all together into a clear, coherent critique. Now here's a simple 4-part structure that just works. Start with an introduction that names the article and gives your overall take on it. That's your thesis. Then, a brief summary of the study's main points, just the basics. The third section is the big one, the critique. This is where you lay out the strengths and the weaknesses, using specific examples from the article to back up every single point you make. Finally, a conclusion that wraps it all up and gives your final judgment on the article's contribution to the field.
And as you write, just keep a few key things in mind. Try to be balanced. Pretty much every study has some good points and some weak points. Always, always, always support your claims with evidence from the text. And remember, the goal here is to be constructive. You're joining an academic conversation, not just trying to find fault. And whatever you do, avoid that trap of just summarizing the article.
I really want this idea to stick with you. This whole exercise, this whole process, it's not about being negative. It's about thoughtful engagement. It's about training your brain to think like a scholar, to carefully weigh ideas and evidence.
So, by learning this skill, you're doing way more than just finishing an assignment. You are grabbing a powerful tool that will help you understand the world around you in a much deeper way. You're a detective now. So the only question left is, what case will you crack next?